Welcome back to the Chris Gates Fitness Podcast. Thanks so much for joining me this week. And we have a brand new episode centered around a common client and listener question. When should you add weight to your lifts? That's what we're going to talk about in this episode. Break down exactly when to know you should scale things up from a training perspective. So when you're lifting weights in the gym, you're working in the rep ranges that you're working in, and you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I know when to take the next step? We're going to break down the answer to that so you know exactly what to do here, and so you know exactly when to make changes and keep progressing in the gym, keep scaling things up. We're going to talk about this concept called progressive overload. Keep progressively overloading in your workouts, and when you can do that consistently, you're going to give your body exactly what it needs to continue to adapt and change and help you continue to see the progress that you want to see. So the answer to this question is really, really powerful, and that's why people ask it all the time. So I'm excited to break this one down. I hope you are excited to dive into it, because honestly, like as a busy parent too, probably something you want to make sure that you're doing is maximizing your time in your workouts and making sure that what you're doing in your workouts is going to get you the best possible results, because you got so many other things going on. If you have 15, 20 minutes, a half hour, however long it may be to invest in your workouts, to invest in yourself, you want to make sure that you're making the most of that time. So we're going to do that here. We're going to try to get you the best possible results by answering this question. So excited to dive in. I hope you are too. Just as a reminder, if you're not subscribed, if you're new to the podcast, if this is your first or one of your first episodes listening, thank you so much for being here. And make sure that you subscribe so you can get every single one of these episodes the minute they're released, okay? The podcast is on every streaming platform for audio. We also do video uploads of these podcasts to my YouTube channel. Just search Chris Gates Fitness. You're going to find me there, and I really appreciate you following along. Also, I am a coach, and if you want help with your health and fitness journey to navigate topics like this and others so you can maximize your time as a busy parent, so that you can dominate in the gym with your health and fitness and in your career with your kids, all that good stuff. That's exactly what I work with people on every single day, and I would love to help you too. So there's a link to my coaching page in the show notes if you want to check that out. All right, so I mentioned that term progressive overload just a minute ago. Let's dive into that, what it means and why it matters, because it truly is kind of the key here when you're trying to balance the effectiveness of your workouts to continue to encourage your body to adapt and change. We need to progressively overload in your workouts so that we can make that happen. And progressive overload simply means that you are continually doing a little bit more in the gym, in your workouts, every time you show up, okay? And so the way I track this with my clients is that we lay everything out basically in a timeline where we say, okay, we're gonna do, let's say 2 workouts a week. And when you do your day 1 workout this week, let's log what you do. Let's log the weight that you lift and the amount of reps you do for each set for each of the individual exercises we're doing. And the reason we do that is because then when we get into the next week of the workout program and we hit that same workout again with those same exercises a second time, what we want to be able to do is look back at what we did the previous week and then see if we can beat that performance in some way. That is progressive overload, whether it be adding a rep to a set, whether it be adding 5 pounds to an exercise. As long as you are slowly and progressively ticking that workload up over time, what that means is it's a confirmation that your body is adapting and changing, right? If you're able to continually tick that workload up, ratchet up the intensity, do more in the gym, it's a sign that your body is adapting. It's a sign that your body is able to recover, repair itself, rebuild, and put you in a position to be able to do that, right? So it's a very, very powerful thing. The only way that you know if you are progressively overloading is if you track what you're doing, right? So that you have a confirmation that the numbers are going up over time. But by doing this, what it means, what progressive overload means, it's just a fancy term for saying that you're continuing to make your workouts harder. You're continuing to challenge your body more and more over time. That is what you have to do to get your body to adapt and change. If you want to build muscle, if you want to get stronger, and also if you want to lose body fat, right? Because if we want to lose body fat, we want to be in a calorie deficit, but also encourage our body to hold on to as much muscle mass as possible. Because when you lose weight, you can lose weight from muscle as well as body fat. But I don't think anybody goes through a weight loss process wanting to lose muscle mass, right? We want to lose body fat. So by lifting weights, you signal to the body that muscle is important. And then week to week, as you progressively overload and you continue to increase your workload, you just strengthen that signal that you're sending to the body that we need to hold on to muscle mass. Okay, it's a very powerful thing. And so it's a really big deal to progressively overload across the board, no matter what your goal is. But that's what progressive overload means. And now a clear sign on whether or not you should be lifting heavier is, first and foremost, are your workouts feeling easier? If you show up and you're doing the same thing week to week, does it feel easier? If it does, then that means you have more to give. It was probably, when you got started, really hard to do that workout, right? Then you do it twice, you do it 3 times, you do it 4 times. It feels considerably more manageable. And part of the reason is because you've adapted to what you did initially. So we need to progressively overload. We need to send a louder signal to the body by adding reps or adding some weight. And obviously this podcast episode is centered around adding weight. And another good way to know if you should add weight is by looking at your rep ranges and then looking at the actual training performance that you are having. So let's say you're lifting, it's a dumbbell bench press for 8 to 10 reps. If you're seeing that on most or all of your sets, you are hitting 10 reps, you're at the top end of that rep range with the weight that you're using, that means you've gotten strong enough to handle that weight. So we can bump the weight up. And if all of your sets do look the same, if you're doing the same amount of reps for each set of each exercise, that's actually a signal as well that you can probably be working harder. Because in reality, like if we think about training hard, like legitimately challenging yourself, right? If you're legitimately challenging yourself and you go into an exercise, that first set, when you're freshest, when you have the most energy to give to that exercise, that should be the set where you're able to do the most amount of reps, okay? And then once you do that, and you legitimately challenge yourself in that first set, and you do the most reps you can do, when you show up to do the second set, you shouldn't be able to hit that same amount of reps because you legitimately challenged yourself. If you legitimately challenge yourself, that means you're going to fatigue your body. And if you fatigue your body, that means you should not be able to show up and do the same amount of reps that you did in your first set, right? So like using that dumbbell bench press example again, if we're doing 8 to 10 reps and you get to 10 reps in the first set and it's legitimately challenging, then you shouldn't be able to hit 10 reps again in your second set. You should only be able to get to 8 or 9, okay? That is a clear indicator and something to pay attention to along the way, because I can't tell you how many times I see programs where people are just doing 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 8. And if you're doing the same amount of reps for each set, that means at some point while you're doing that exercise, you're leaving effort on the table. All right, let's talk now about how long you should max out the reps of each of your sets before adding weight. And really, I want to talk about this because it's important to be clear about what rep ranges are intended to be, okay? Rep ranges are not magical. 8 to 10 reps, there's nothing really special about that. 10 to 12, 12 to 15, 15 to 20. These rep ranges essentially are just a tool to help guide you to figure out how much weight to lift, all right? So if you're doing 8 to 10 reps, as compared to if you were doing 15 to 20 reps, you would pick very different weights to use for those exercises. If you're doing that dumbbell bench press that we've been talking about throughout this episode, if it's for 8 to 10 reps, you're going to lift something heavier than you would for 15 to 20. Because if you have to get into the 15 to 20 rep range, you maybe can't use the 50 or 60 pound dumbbells. You may need to use 30s or 40s, right? So rep ranges, I think there's a lot of confusion and just a lack of understanding about what rep ranges are intended to be. They are just intended to be a guide for you to select the tool you're going to use, and that tool is the weight. Now, rep ranges can help you stimulate the body in slightly different ways, but really when we're talking about body composition, it just comes down to challenging yourself, right? We don't need to get too into the weeds about like, am I training my central nervous system or am I training my muscles in my body? Like at the end of the day, if you are challenging yourself on a set per set basis, you're going to put yourself in a fantastic position to see your body and adapt and change over time. If we do really want to get into the weeds, there is research that shows you can build muscle lifting anywhere between as little as 5 reps per set to as many as 30 reps per set, as long as you are in each of those individual sets that you're performing, getting to a point where at the end of the set, you're within 1 to 2 reps of failure, aka 1 to 2 reps within that point of not being able to do any more reps, then you're going to be really effectively stimulating your body to change, okay? If we lift in the lower rep ranges with heavier weight, it does send a bit more of a strength stimulus to the body, because building muscle and building strength, while they are tightly intertwined, they also can be trained in different ways. Something you might notice with strength athletes, if you see a power lifter or an Olympic weightlifter, they probably don't have the biggest muscles. They probably don't have as big of muscles as a professional bodybuilder. And the reason for that is because those athletes that are focused on strength train in the lower rep ranges with heavier weights. Whereas a professional bodybuilder would train probably all rep ranges, but be focused on a lot of volume and intensity and getting to that, threshold of failure. Okay. So when you train at heavier weights for lower reps, it trains your central nervous system, which is a big piece to the puzzle for building strength, getting the body to adapt to be able to lift heavier weight. But again, that's kind of getting into the weeds of it. Really, at the end of the day, the rep range you use is just a tool to figure out what type of weight you should be lifting. And so if you're lifting 8 to 10 reps and you're consistently hitting 10 reps, then your body has reached the point where now we can select a different tool to use in that rep range. So if you get to 3 sets of 10, like I said before, you probably should do this before you get to that point. But if you're continually hitting 10 reps, then that's a sign, okay, you can probably add 5 pounds. And so then after you add weight to an exercise, how should you operate from there? In that 8 to 10 rep range, if you're getting to 10 and you go up 5 pounds, well, then you're still operating in the 8 to 10 rep range. You should still, in your workouts, push to try to get to 10 reps. But what you'll probably find is that you're going to see your rep counts decrease a little bit. So if you go from 50 pounds on a dumbbell bench press and then you go up to 55, what you'll probably see is that you were doing 50 pounds and hitting 10 reps. You go down to 55, you may only be able to get 8 or 9. So then you're back into the ballpark of, on a week-to-week basis, trying to beat your past performance and trying to work that rep count up back to 10 with the heavier weight. And it's kind of just this never-ending yo-yoing, right? This cycle where we go up in weight, the reps come back down a little bit, then we work on bringing the reps up. And then when we get back to the top end of the rep range, we bump the weight back up. The reps are probably going to fall back down, and we just continue to do that cycle. And as you do that, again, that's what continues to send a signal to the body that you're doing challenging things in your workouts with your muscles. And your body says, okay, if we're going to be able to get through the day, if we're going to be able to get through these workouts, well, the body just wants to be as efficient as it possibly can be, no matter what. And exercise is no different. So with exercising, the body's going to say, that's difficult. We need to adapt and change to make it easier the next time you do it. And so then the body works on building muscle. Now, before we get out of here, let's talk about a few mistakes to just make sure that you avoid. One of them I already mentioned, where it's like if you're continually hitting the top end of the rep range and you're not increasing the weight, then you're just leaving progress on the table, okay? And unfortunately, this is what you see most people doing in the gym every day. If you go into any public or commercial gym, you see a lot of people doing the same workouts. They pick the same weights up. They do the same routine every time they go in the gym. And that's understandable. We kind of get in a comfortable place with what we do, and we just keep doing that thing. Well, the problem is, after you do that workout 3-4 times in a row, you will have stimulated as much change as you possibly can for your body. And then you're just maintaining. And there's nothing wrong with maintaining, but if you really want to continue to see progress and you want to put time into your exercise program and see a return on investment of that time, you can't keep doing the same thing, okay? So a big mistake is just doing the same weight for the same reps every single time you do each workout. Now, on the flip side of that, a lot of maybe ego lifters will take the route, and this is most men typically fall into this category of adding weight too quickly. Okay, so if you're in that 8 to 10 rep range and you're doing 50s for sets of 8, the next week you throw on 55 and you get like 7, and then the next week you go up to 60 and now you're doing 5 or 6 reps, and now your form and technique is breaking down. Like, that's not going to help you. You need to build up a certain amount of capacity and allow your body to actually catch up on recovery, repair itself, and prepare itself to be able to handle more. But if you're constantly adding weight before your body is showing you that it's ready, that's when you're risking injury because form and technique will naturally break down when you're lifting weight that's too heavy. You're not ready for it. You're just not going to be able to maintain the ability to lift in a safe manner. Okay, so that's definitely one to avoid as well. And I mentioned this before too, but not tracking your lifts ultimately in this entire discussion is the worst thing you can do, because if you're not tracking what you're doing in the gym, there is no way to know if you're progressively overloading. Okay. And the nice thing is, this is not complicated. I think a lot of people think like, oh, I got to track all this stuff. It's like overly complicated, going to take a ton of time. It doesn't take much time at all. It actually takes no more additional time if you're doing your workouts correctly, right? Because when we do a set, then we put the weight down and we take a rest period. So rather than scrolling on your phone, texting people, wasting time in the gym, during your rest period, pull out a notebook or go onto the notes app of your phone, type in what you did for that last set, then put the phone down. When your rest period is over, pick up the weights, do another set, put the weights down, then once again, during the rest period, log what you just did. If you just make that a regular cadence when you're lifting, then this takes no more time at all, and you're documenting very basic information that takes 5 seconds to jot down, but makes a absolutely massive impact when we're talking about long-term progress, because then you're allowing yourself to be in that position where you can always look back at what you did last week, see those numbers, and then go into that workout today and saying, I'm going to beat that past version of myself. I did sets of 10 and 9 and 8 last week. Okay, this week I'm going to shoot for at least one more rep on those sets. Or since I did 10 last week, I'm going to bump the weight up 5 pounds, and then I'm going to try and see how I can do with that heavier weight. Like, that's kind of the fun game that this strength training journey turns into, is it's a constant battle and game of trying to beat the past version of yourself. You can get competitive with it, but with yourself, which just forces you to improve as a person. It can be a lot of fun, but it all comes down to, making sure you're tracking that information. So at the end of the day, remember, rep ranges are a tool. They are not the rule. Don't let them box you in or limit you. Use those rep ranges and the information that you track over time to inform what you should do moving forward. Once you hit the top end of that rep range, especially for the first set, it's a sign that your body's ready to do a little bit more. And at the end of the day, just make sure you're pushing yourself. Legitimately challenging yourself is what is required to see consistent progress with lifting. And so if you're doing that over a long time course, you are going to see a ton of progress. It's those little incremental victories. It's beating yourself every single time you show up, day after day, week after week, month after month, that really snowballs into something massive. So at the end of this episode, I think is a good question to ask yourself, like, are you coasting? Are you doing the same weight for the same reps every single time you show up? Or are you legitimately challenging yourself? And the answer to that question is going to help you figure out what your action item is at the end of this episode. But thank you so much for listening. I hope this was helpful. Looking forward to stopping back in here next week with another one for you. And I hope you're enjoying the relaunch of the podcast so far, answering these listener questions. So make sure you're subscribed. If you need help with stuff like this and you're interested in learning more about coaching, that link is in the show notes. But otherwise, thanks again, and I will talk to you next week.